We're not. Good old American tongue. There's that make mistake. We're going to start. Well, good morning to everybody, and apologies for the late start. We've obviously had some technical issues, but hopefully we're over now and we won't drop out halfway through. Good morning. This is People and Families Scrutiny Committee, and we're joined this morning by some colleagues from the HOS Committee. So just the standard note, the live streaming is at the moment on YouTube, or we hope we are because of technical issues, and a recording of the meeting will be available afterwards. As usual, we're not expecting a fire alarm test today, so if the alarm does sound, please follow officers out of the building and gather in the cathedral grounds. Thank you. We've got some expected witnesses. I think most of them are here at the moment. But thanks to Councillor Spence for coming along this morning. Nick Pressmeg, actually it says Nikki Pressmeg on here, so I'm a bit worried about it. I nearly read that wrongly.
The mum hasn't sent a note in, has she?
Claire Hardy, Head of Strategy and Innovation, Amber Stevens and Alison Ansell. But before we get on to that, I think we've got a few standard pieces to go through on the agenda. Have we got any apologies this morning or substitutions?
So yes, so Chairman, just before I do that, it's just to highlight the membership item this time around. Also notes the changes that were approved by full council last month. So the committee are just really asked to note those changes and the change in membership details. And there's clearly a few new members that you may wish to welcome, Chairman. But as regards apologies, we only have Councillor June Lumley, who's joining us remotely via Zoom, and Councillor Jeff Henry is substituting for her. Other than that, no other apologies from the People and Families membership. And as you alluded to earlier, there are some colleagues here from the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee here as well.
Well, thank you, and welcome to the new members of the committee. Obviously, this may be something of a baptism of fire for you because there's quite a lot of details that we've been through over the past. So hopefully you'll be able to catch up and get to grips with all those fairly quickly. But any declarations of interest? I can't see anybody indicating. So the first item really is the election of the vice chairman for this for the PAF committee for this municipal year. Have we got any nominations at all? I think I've had one nomination for Councillor Guglielmi to continue as vice chairman. So if you've got a second that, Mr. Chairman, those are in a second. Okay, and then the other opposition vice chairman. Any nominations?
Chairman, can I nominate Councillor Peter May, who's been on this committee for as long as I can remember, and I'd like to propose him as second vice chairman from the Zoom.
Okay. Any other nominations at all?
Another proposal, Chairman. No, second one.
I'll second that, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any other nominations? So I think we take that as general consent. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. Going on to the minutes, we've got two sets of minutes to approve because our last meeting was an informal one. So we've got the minutes of meeting held on the 9th of March and then on the 6th of April. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to have a look at those. Taking the 9th of March, first of all, is everybody happy and content with those? Agreed? Okay. And then the 6th of April, again. Agreed.
Yeah, agreed, yeah.
Thank you very much. So matters arising as at the 8th of June. I don't think we've got any at the moment.
With our matters arising, Chairman, I did send around a more detailed note by email yesterday. Perhaps maybe that's something we could deal with after the formal meeting and just go through that in more detail. So I think members wanted to do that as a result of the private session we had last month. But I suggest that might be something we can do after the meeting.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Thank you for that. Questions from the public?
No questions received.
Which takes us onto the main item. And apologies for keeping you all waiting because of technology. I blame that. We all do it all the time. So it's preparing for Air Quality Commission assurance, and I think you're going to give us an update on the progress that you made in that preparation. And I think we had a pre-meet yesterday to discuss this amongst the group. And in many ways, this is an unusual sort of scrutiny event almost, because normally we look at things after they've happened or when they're about to happen, or it's unusual for us to look at the preparation for something that's about to happen. So I think this is probably a new experience for us as well as for you. So I think that may drive some of the questioning a little bit, because I suppose in many ways we the Scrutiny Committee are being asked to look at whether we think there's any gaps in the preparation that you're making, anything that maybe we feel ought to be honed in on, and whether certainly from a user's point of view, there's anything that likely to be picked by CQC in terms of their inspections. But I'll pass over to you and leave you to present us with what you're up to on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'll introduce briefly before handing over. I must apologise that Nick has to leave at 11 o'clock because of an important external meeting, and I'm afraid I'm going then too because I've rather bust up my legs, so I'm off up to A&D. When the government's social care reforms were announced, and there are several of them for which we have to prepare, not least the now postponed till 2025, but that's not far away, reform to social care charging. Nick and I, Nick was very concerned right at the outset that we do everything we could to start planning for that change of regime at an early stage. And so when, as part of that preparation, he asked me to agree or support his commissioning of a review from the LGA as a peer review to really help us identify whether the questions we are asking ourselves were the questions that they also rose with us. That seemed a very commendable piece of work. And if I may say, Chair, I thank the scrutiny members who also took part in that exercise. We would all say that the greatest value to be extracted from this exercise was undertaking the exercise and the preparatory work. I know that the adult leadership team had significant meetings over the period in which they really did some analytical navel gazing. Concept of nasal gaze is quite interesting. Analytical navel gazing to see where they believed their issues were. And actually, there's a good symmetry in most places between those which the peer reviewers identified and those that the team have identified for themselves. So I'm going to pass over to the team to take you briefly through the findings. I think you've had the slides already. But I would say it's helped us now and helped the ALT to really focus in on, therefore, these are the priorities. This is where the gaps are biggest, or this is where the issues are most complex, in order that we can come through this. This is potentially not far away. And we know that we are potentially part of 7 different CQC inspections because of the complex geography in which we operate. And only earlier this week, I really had to put a warning signal out to one of our partners who was about to sign up for a forerunner CQC inspection in which we would have been heavily involved. And that's not that I'm trying to defer anything. It is just we have a huge workload on. We've just gone through this exercise and we now need to spend the time seeing the things we need in place. So I will hand over, Nick, to you and the team.
Thank you very much, Councillor Spence, and thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, you have Alison Ansell, who is our locality director in Essex, and Claire Hardy and Amber Stevens, and they are the main people, although there are many, many more people involved in the preparation, but they're the main people leading and coordinating our preparation work. So if I do leave at 11, and I think I'll probably have to because I've been called, as John said, an important external meeting. You've got people who absolutely will be able to answer your questions and who know what they're talking about. So I'll be leaving you in good hands if I do have to go. And I would also say, just before I hand over to Claire, who will do a very quick presentation so we can get the discussion. As you said, Chair, actually, we don't know what's coming. Some of us have been around long enough, myself included, to remember when CQC were last year, and that was probably about 14 years ago. So much has changed. CQC is a different organisation. They haven't undertaken adult social care inspections. They've only done provider things. So actually, anything you help us is valuable. Anything you ask us, sorry, is valuable help in preparation, because we really do not know what it's going to be like in reality. So this is important training and preparation for us. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much. So if you could go on to the next slide. You've obviously had the slides in advance, but I'll just pop through them and draw out some key points as we go through. So just setting the scene, the Care Quality Commission officially commenced quality assurance of local authorities and integrated care systems as of April this year. It's taking a phased approach to that implementation, starting with some pilots that will be taking place over the next few months. The first one, I think, is in July. That will take place over the next few months, and it's then from October that they'll then be coming out to all of the local authorities, and they're looking to cover all of the local authorities across a 2-year period from October 23 to September 25. They've got this new single assessment framework. It's not completely signed off yet. We've got a draft of what the local authority assurance framework within that looks like. It's based around those 4 themes of working with people, providing support, ensuring safety and leadership. But through the pilots, they may change it a little bit. So it's not completely signed off, but we're not expecting significant change to it. So that's the sort of why we're here. So what have we been doing to prepare? So I think it was one of the key things. Oh, sorry, next slide. Yes, apologies, I'm changing it on here. So what have we done to prepare? So as Nick said, we've pulled together a sort of programme approach to coordinate all of our preparations. We've developed we had a quality assurance framework in place, but throughout COVID, things have kind of changed, but things have been paused and so on. So we've refreshed that quality assurance framework, made sure that it aligns with what's in the Care Quality Commission framework. And in December, we started to roll that out. There's more to do to get that fully rolled out and embedded, but we've got a new quality assurance framework so that we are on a regular basis quality assuring all of our work. We've undertaken a self-assessment. So we've done that against the 4 themes within the CQC framework, and there's 9 quality statements within there. So we've undertaken that self-assessment, which was incredibly valuable to help us reflect on where we are with our work. Alongside that, we've collated an evidence base. So where we're saying we believe we're strong on this is a real strength of ours, we want to make sure that we've got the evidence there to demonstrate that. And then we've undertaken a number of sort of external activities. So the first one was a local government association peer inspection. So that brings in colleagues from other local authorities, people volunteer and come and spend some time on site, but some virtually, and using the CQC assurance framework, look through our self-assessment, look through our evidence. And they conducted a range of focus groups and interviews. And I know many of you were involved in a focus group on Scrutiny, but we also worked through Health Watch and had some focus groups with people with lived experience, carers, but also staff and partners as well. So thank you very much for all of those that contributed. That was really helpful. But they've also sort of used that to triangulate any findings they find. Inevitably, with something like this, you can't do a completely in-depth, it's time limited. Obviously, when you're meeting with a group of carers or lived experience, it's only a small representation of the number of people that we support. So it's a perspective and a view, but it's not a complete view. So what we've tried to do is layer up different things to try and give us as rounded a view as possible. So we're also part of regional improvement networks through ADAS, which is the Association of Directors of Social Services. And we have a buddy system, and they also have an ex-director that looks through our reports. And so we've been using colleagues within the region and different themed networks as well to explore our learning within the self-assessment, help us to reflect, help us to benchmark with colleagues and see and understand where we are. We've also then got a programme of work around improving our data and intelligence. CQC will be taking at the moment national returns, which we do on an annual basis. But as of this year, that also changes and we do quarterly data returns of our client level data. So they will get a lot of our data to help use as evidence and to benchmark and spot trends. So we've also got a programme of work that's really looking at how we make sure that our data quality and that our systems are working as well as we can. And a lot of that is also linked into the procurement of the new social care case management system. So some of the things we can meet now, some are much broader, longer term solutions. And of course, we've engaged with staff and partners, and particularly we're engaging now with our integrated care systems around those sort of joint integrated care inspections that will come as well. So what I'll take you through is some of the findings. These are predominantly sort of some of the findings from the peer inspection, but we've layered them in with some additional bits because, as I said, the peer inspection couldn't pick up on everything, so we've layered in additional bits as well. So we've got a little bit there of detail around the kind of three key bits there in terms of the self-assessment, the peer challenge and the regional sector-led improvement work. And I've just pulled out quotes there. We had positive feedback from the peer inspection about the session they had with Scrutiny. They thought we had a very effective scrutiny function. They also reflected well that the PAF and the HOSC were working well together, and they were very complimentary about that. But there's a little quote there from the staff they met. So they felt that the staff that they met were really proud and passionate about the work they do in Essex. So that was really good to hear. So I'm just going to take you through some of the learnings. I've put them under the four themes within the assurance framework. So the first theme is working with people. So this covers our assessment function. So people coming in, having an assessment, a review, but it also includes our early help, the front door and our preventative services. So they were very complimentary about a good range of preventative services we had. They noted the work we do on care tech, with equipment, and assistive technology. They also did a case file audit and they picked up around some of the strengths-based practice. This is really working with people on an individual level to see what they can do rather than all the time focusing on what people can't do. In terms of, so all of the, I should say all the ones with a tick are the strengths, and then they put in areas for consideration. So we particularly asked them to look at carers. We knew that carers was an area that we wanted to do more on. We'd launched our carers strategy a year ago, but we wanted to kind of really take stock and see how that was going. So they did a bit of a dive into the carers there. And yes, there was some reflections back that the strategy is there, but it hasn't actually kind of having enough of an impact on the ground. We really need to look at how we can speed things up and get more impact in terms of the changes we want to make there on the ground. They noted within our Meaningful Lives Matters programme that there'd been some really good work around user voice, lived experience, co-production. And we had pockets of that all around, but we probably need to do a bit more to get that embedded across the piece. They also, of course, noted around our backlogs on assessment and reviews and deprivation of liberty. That's something that came up particularly through the regional sector-led improvement work and is a challenge that many of us across the region are experiencing. I'll move on now to providing support. So providing support, they did a focus group with our providers, so the care market and representatives there. And there was lots of positive feedback from there, and particularly positive around the work we've done with providers during the day. Good to see. They were complimentary about the work that we've done to reconfigure our day opportunities and change that to more support around employment. and around the support we provide not only to our staff but to the workforce around training and development. There was some opportunities that they felt we could make more of. So not necessarily things that were right, but things that we could grow. So relationships with the voluntary sector. There was more that they thought we could do to maximise the opportunities with the voluntary and community sector. Carers, our information and advice to carers, and potentially some opportunities around the direct payment support process. And we were actually out to procurement whilst they were in for a new direct payment support service. So some of these are things that we absolutely knew and had plans in place, but obviously they weren't yet into sort of live action. The third theme is ensuring safety, very complementary around the way we work with providers, around the quality assurance of providers. Impressed to see that we've got a home first option embedded in all of our hospitals, and the work around the Safeguarding Adults Board was also highlighted. I've already mentioned that we were doing a new quality assurance framework, so they did note that that needs to be further rolled out and embedded, and that was only started in December, so that was absolutely where we expected it to be. And whilst there's a lot of strengths around our safeguarding work, there were some bits around kind of loops on communication loops on feedback to providers and some of the safeguarding records and some processes that could be improved. So we're looking at all of that. Leadership is the final theme. So they noted we had a mature set of leaders at the strategic level. They were very complimentary about our levelling up agenda and the corporate plan. And felt that there was a strong wellbeing support for our staff, and I thought that was actually second to none in the way that we support our staff around wellbeing. But there were some areas for growth. They acknowledged the complexities of our system around the 3 ICSs, and obviously there's been a lot of change with that over the last year. They noted there was some good work they particularly looked at one of the ICSs. There's some positive work there and said it's how we can kind of continue to grow that. And that they thought there was some more opportunities around public health across the council, and noted that some recent changes there were good. We could do some more to build upon that. So that's a sort of quick summary through of some of the findings, and we've taken stock and reflected. So we've been working over the past sort of couple of months to really look through this and work out where do we want to go next? Where do we think are our priorities? So we've identified 5 kind of key priority areas for focus. So those are carers, lived experience and co-production. So that's co-production is how we actually work with people with lived experience on a much more equal basis to develop, co-design and co-produce our services and solutions. People waiting and operational service efficiency, safeguarding and equality, diversity and inclusion. And what we've said on these 5 areas is, so these are the 5. We've had work on a number of these already. So it's not that, as we mentioned, we've already launched the carer strategy a year ago. But we're actually saying that we want to see more of a step change here. So it's time to take stock. So yes, we have been doing some work, but can we actually do more? Can we do it a little bit faster? Have a bit more of an impact to make sure that we're really getting some progress on these areas. And in particular, we want to make sure that we get some progress on these within the next 6 months. They won't be fixed within 6 months, but we want to make sure that we can see a definite change happen. There's some further areas within that. So the next column, you've got current areas of improvement. So these are things that they highlighted that we already have work happening on. So I mentioned the quality assurance framework. We've already rolled that out. We've got work going on to continue to embed that. Strengths-based practice. We've got a new principal social worker that started a couple of weeks ago and is really helping to support that work. We've got work continuing around our locality model, ample budgets, and the direct payment support service was out to market at the time, and the new provider arrangement will go live in beginning of July there. There's a number of further opportunities that we haven't quite got onto yet. So these are ones that we're still exploring. And some of these have more of a corporate kind of thing, because obviously the CQC inspection is not just an inspection of the adult social care function, it's an inspection of the county council as a whole and how it delivers its adult social care responsibilities. So we're going to explore with some more with colleagues more broadly around things like how we can maximise the opportunities from public health, better understand the impact that COVID has had on our residents, and the opportunities around the voluntary sector and how we can explore it through the Health and Wellbeing Board further that common purpose in a large county. So those are where we've got to. We've got a little bit in here then around what we think that CQC will particularly be focusing on. So obviously some of this is a little bit of guesswork at this moment in time. They haven't, as I said, finalised their assurance framework, and they've still got the pilots to really help them refine and develop their process. But we think things that they will particularly be focusing on are things like people waiting, the quality of practice. They'll want to see that we've got that really good strengths-based practice embedded. The provision in the market and how stable our care market is, the quality within our market, and whether people are waiting for care once they've been assessed. Choice and controls, whether we're able to give people personalised support and able to choose. How we are embedding the lived experience of both adults and carers and really working with people and understanding that lived experience voice. Obviously, we need to ensure that our safeguarding systems and processes are clear and secure. And that healthway pathways and transfers of care are obviously always a big focus. I'm not going to run through the next slide, but this is the key metrics. We've just drawn out. This again is a bit of a layering up. So this, we've drawn out what we know from CQC around some of the key metrics that they will be looking at, but they haven't published a complete list yet, so this will change. But we've also linked it to some of the things that we are particularly keen to focus on as well. So this is a bit of a layering up of some of the key metrics that we will be looking at and keeping a close eye on over the forthcoming months. And then finally, I've just got in there the timeline for CQC. So as such, the new duty has gone live. They're working over the sort of summer period to do those pilots. We are going to review our self-assessment throughout August so that we've got it ready if we do get called early on for an inspection in October. But it will be from October that they will then commence that process. They won't be publishing, all of those pilots are going to have ratings. So similar to those who are familiar with Ofsted or ratings for CQC do for providers, there will be a rating. But the first batch of ratings from those pilots and early ones won't be published till early 2024. And I think that's part of CQC being able to make sure it benchmarks appropriately across all of the local authorities. Right, there we are.
Well, thank you. I'm sure that's going to generate some questions. I just have one myself, and it's really about what we're hoping to get out of this process. Obviously, as far as the council is concerned, you know, it struck me that there's sort of two facets. It's like taking an exam at the end of part of your education. There's an intent to pass the exam, because it gets you the certificate and the qualification, but there's also embedding the learning that you get from getting to that point. And I just wondered how well you see that. Do you think this process is enabling you to improve the service in a way that you wouldn't have and highlighted areas that you wouldn't have identified had you not had to pass this exam effectively?
I think for me, I'll bring you in. I think for me, it's not that it's brought us into new areas. It's helped us have additional insights on the areas we focused. Top on this list as carers, we always knew that was the area that required most significant improvement. And I think, as Nick says in his report, there are no surprises here, but the process has helped us gain much greater analytical clarity as to how we go about achieving the improvements we want to achieve. Is that fair, Nick?
That's fair. John, yes. So professionally, I've advocated for assurance as part of my role in the Association of Directors of Adult Social Care. I think it's a good thing. And I think it will help all social care departments in the country develop and learn. But we don't have a benchmark yet. We don't quite know how it's going to work. There may be some surprises, and I'll be very careful and guarded in what I say, because they will scrutinise every single piece of publicly available evidence, including the recording of this meeting, I suspect. So I don't want to provoke our inspectors before they arrive. But generally speaking, I think it will be a good learning opportunity. And as John said, it just gives us that little bit of greater impetus in areas where we were already working hard to improve. So it means we don't take a step back.
Thank you. Well, I'll open it to questions. Does anybody?
Eddie Johnson.
Sorry, Councillor Johnson.
Yeah. Good morning. Thank you for coming along and getting the presentation. We've seen it a few times now. I'm still grappling with it, so you'll have to forgive me. It's new to me. It doesn't feel like scrutiny to me. And what worries me is, and maybe it's unfounded, is that the scrutiny hopefully will be the CQC or whatever they're called, forgive me. So if for us, it feels like critical friend, but critical friend with what? Because I can't get to grips with what's happening, and maybe that's me, or maybe it's just the subject matter. And hopefully that will, we're meant to be hopefully critical friend to you to help you to be able to pass the CQC inspection. So I'm struggling with it. So forgive me, not a question, but just telling you how I feel, and the CQC hopefully can listen to that when they listen to it back. So over to you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry.
Thank you. And I think that if I could just add a little bit to that. I mean, the fact that we were interviewed as part of the peer review is interesting, because it looks as though we're under scrutiny as the scrutiny committee, as well as the service and everything that goes with it. So that's why I said at the very beginning, this is an unusual process for us. I mean, we obviously want to be able to help, but it's being able to do that in the best way that we can.
So me too.
I'll say something. A great deal of the review, the reviewers were at the beginning far more interested in the wider context and the infrastructure of the geography, the ICSEs, the health and wellbeing boards, and so on. And it took a long time for us to educate them as to that. Whereas we, of course, are utterly focused on how we do the role better. The reason for scrutiny to be interested, as far as I'm concerned, is that it's very much in the interest of Essex County Council and its residents that adult social care achieve a satisfactory or better rating from the CQC. It would be very difficult if we were to not receive at least a good one. And I think where it comes in, Chairman, actually, is what you don't yet have here is a clear plan. You have an areas for focus. And I would have thought some months down the line, you might want to check on the progress of the plan towards the outcomes that are being identified here.
Thank you, John. So CQC will inspect the council against the Care Act, not all of which is adult social care, or predominantly is adult social care. They will look at our governance processes, and they will look at how well we are scrutinised as part of that process. So I think in answer to Councillor Johnson's question, what they will be looking at is how you're dealing with the component parts of adult social care. Are you looking at our quality assurance? Are you looking at our safeguarding? Are you looking at our mental health arrangements? Are you looking at our waiting lists, and so on? Rather than how have you supported us as a critical friend as we prepare. And actually, if you break it down into those component parts, the answer is yes, you are looking at hospital discharge. You are looking at the arrangements around EPOD. And maybe quality assurance is an area that we'll talk to the two scrutiny chairs about, bringing that so you can see our new quality assurance processes. So I think what we'll do is we'll try and work with you to deal with it in a series of bite-sized chunks. So you'll never see the whole thing, but you'll see the components, and we'll go through them in easier steps. Today is really just opening up of that conversation. So it's a kind of what works best for you, but also what are the areas of adult social care that you feel you might need to scrutinise, but you haven't quite got there yet as a committee, and we can provide you with the information to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Golden.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. it's in everyone's best interest, not just the people sitting in this room and the wider administration, and even those in opposition at this council, but also the residents of Essex, that we have a very strong adult social care system, that we do well in the inspection, because if we do well in the inspection, that indicates, if we trust what the CQC is doing, that indicates that we're running a really good service, and that means that our residents will be well served. So I just want to make that clear, and in the spirit of wanting to do better, that's why I'm going to be asking the questions that I'm asking. I think that's the role of scrutiny. So I have some specific questions, but I'm going to start off with something that I think other colleagues think this as well, that I struggle with some of the language used in the presentation. And it's really easy. So I have a background in management consulting and specifically in IT, and I can very quickly drop into kind of IT lingo and you use loads of jargon that people haven't got a clue about. But when I read things, and so I understand how it happens, but these kind of reports, we have to remember that they are publicly available. And we really do want the public to be able to understand what's going on as well. And it's our role as councillors to make sure that it becomes accessible to the public, I think. And so, so when we have there's some English that's used on various parts of the report. So on page 31, we talk about evidence of strength-based practice in teams. I haven't got a clue what that means. And I can guess, my guess would be, just so you can see whether I might be thinking totally right, might be totally wrong. My guess would be focusing on what the skills and expertise people have in a team and getting them to do those bits and focusing up. But I might be wrong about that. So I'd like that explained more. Another example would be on page 32, using people's stories to create a strong narrative and push through barriers. What barriers? What do we mean by a narrative? What's that narrative used for? What do we mean by people's stories? Do we mean their background? Do we mean the experience that they've had? It's that kind of, let's explain it to the public so that they can see it. And as a scrutiny committee, we can understand it. And then on page 34, with the last example that I'll give you is that public health is an investable proposition. I think that means that we think public health is a good thing. We should spend some money on it. But I don't know, it's just jargon, and I'd rather it weren't. I'd rather it were plain English so anybody can pick this up and read it and understand what it means. So then they can ask questions about it. But if they put in a position of going, I don't know what that means, so I can't question it, it makes it really difficult for people. So that would be my overriding thing about this whole thing. I have some other specific ones, and I don't want to take up all the committee's time. So I'm just going to focus on the other one that I really want to bring back, and I might come back later if the chairman will permit me. The key metrics on page 38. I'd like to understand, do we track these already? And if we do, if we see the historical data, and what are we aiming for? So I don't know what good looks like. I don't know what bad looks like. And then something that I noticed is that these are all, as far as I can work out, these are all quantitative assessments. There are all the numbers of people that do this, the number of times this happens, and there was nothing qualitative in there. So there was no saying to our customers, how did you feel about it? Did you know, what's your satisfaction with this service? So it would be really good to see some of that in there. I know that's harder to assess and look at the outcomes, but I'd really like to see something in there, because ultimately, if our customers are feeling satisfied, people are using our service, and that's got to be an indication that they're doing something well or doing something not so well that we need to focus on. So those are my comments, and there's some questions in there for you as well. Okay.
Jonathan, do you want to say anything? Okay, so thank you. So that's exactly why we're here. So thank you very much. Because that's exactly what's going to help us be the best version of ourselves, which is probably a bit of a jargonistic response as well, isn't it? We don't like the jargon either. It's not ours. We are having to use the words of the CQC and the peer. So, and in public health, an investable proposition is a direct quote from the peer review report that we've got. I think what they mean is we should be spending more money on certain parts of our prevention and public health. So you're right, we need to unpack it if people are to understand it.
Yeah.
So we can't just replay it. So we take the project. Absolutely take the point. And I won't go through the other quotes, but I think they're equally legitimate. We need to unpack that. So actually strengths-based practice is about recognizing that individuals have capabilities and strengths and not always seeing them as people who are in need or victims of their circumstance, but people who have resources, families, networks, and so on. But you wouldn't necessarily draw that conclusion. So I think that's really, really
So I
helpful.
thought it was about staff rather than.
No, that's a perfectly reasonable assumption. So I think you're right. We need to unpack that so that anybody can read it. So you take that absolutely. And hopefully if they do watch the recording, they stop using the language when they write the metrics, they are the metrics we think CQC will use given what we know thus far. And we can provide you with where we are, where we've been, where we think we're going to be, and where we position in our comparative family of local authorities. And one of the things you'll notice when you see the data is that big county councils perform very differently to unitaries. So nationally, we sit in families of county councils rather than families of unitaries. So we can do that, and we'd actually welcome coming back to scrutiny and going through that data and showing you where we want to be. And in terms of the qualitative side of things, and I don't know if colleagues want to say something. Yeah, we think you're right. They are very focused at the moment on process. They say they're very focused on experience and outcomes, but then the things they ask us to measure are all about numbers and process. But I don't know if everyone knows.
So we do have other metrics that we currently record. So certainly we use through the peer inspection, and they gave us feedback on satisfaction with our care tech services are very high. We do a survey every year of adults with lived experience that gives us data, and every other year on carers as well. So we do have wider metrics. I think this was just applying a lens on what we think CQC and what we're hearing on that basis at the moment. What CQC will also do, though, is they have 5 categories of evidence. So there is what they call their process ones, which is all your policies, your procedures. There's your, they do call them the outcomes, but they're not. They're more these sort of kind of metrics, although some of those other ones do start to feed in. But then they have feedback from people with lived experience. So they will do focus groups, they will do surveys to gather information from people who have used adult social care, from carers. And so they will do that to also gather some of those wider perspectives and the outcomes. So there are some more kind of data-driven versions on people's experiences.
I also want to come on a case first, but I'm now really self-conscious about this. So we've all got lived experience. They actually mean people with disabilities who've used services, people who, but they use the phrase people with lived experience, which I suspect is everybody in this room.
Yeah, I was just going to add, it's highly likely as well that CQC will look at some individual case files and our recording and start picking up how we've said things, how we've recorded it, that they can see the voice of the person and their experience in the voice of their network or their informal carer. And then they may well follow some of those things through to then check with our workforce, with our partners to triangulate that experience. So it's likely that they're going to be looking at those aspects as well.
Thank you. I know I've got a couple of people who want to speak. I was just going to add something to that last question, if I may. I mean, we know that CQC are going through a learning process with this. It's a relatively new regime. They're going to be developing the skills. I mean, certainly things like the jargon, if that's theirs, then in a way we probably need to push back on that. But I think in terms of how the things are measured and how they carry out that, I'd hate to think that, you know, the first people who are inspected get involved in some of this, and then as it develops, they start to get a better regime of inspection, which may be good or bad. But I just hope that we would have the opportunity, and certainly if we're asked to gain a scrutiny, to slightly challenge back the CQC in terms of the efficacy of the questioning and the things that they're challenging, to make sure that their response is as good as possible as well. So I'd hope it would be something of a two-way street on that. But sorry, I think I had Carlo. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. And we seem to have been discussing this for quite some time. And I'd just like to make reference to the peer review that was carried out in February time. And I think the comments from the chairman were that it was almost a scrutiny of our own scrutiny process. It wasn't there what we thought was going to go and discuss the 4 areas that you went through there, Claire, and it was far from it. It was just for them to understand if our own arrangements were fit for purpose. And I think that came out, and we had a discussion afterwards. Said, did we miss something? You know, did we not get asked questions around the specific 4 areas? And I think I'm understanding a bit more. I attended an LGA briefing yesterday, who was with a lady from CQC, Mary Fringe, who she was quite, her statements were quite concerned the fact that there is no framework in place yet. You know, it's still work in progress. You know, it's become a legal duty, but even they don't know what they're going to assess authorities on, which is quite concerning. You know, it sounds like the horse is bolted before the race is started. So I'd be quite interested to understand if what they come up with aligns with the consideration, the work you've done, you know, about, you know, gathering evidence and engaging with people, you know. I mean, those considerations that you've come up under the various headings is great, and that could possibly translate an action plan maybe for you to pursue, which that's what I would imagine. And it's great to see that there are areas that, you know, you are performing well, that the service is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And that'll be interesting to see, like I said, you know, once that they'll come out and say, this is what we're going to be inspecting on, if it aligns with them. I mean, as far as scrutiny is concerned, it's quite simple, really. You know, it's just, you know, it's what our service, is it safe? Does it deliver value for money? Is the quality the best we can give? Do we get very good value for money that we invest in the service? And are the service users and the staff happy with all the arrangements and what they do? I mean, that's really for the job of scrutiny, that's that, you know, to ensure that, you know, all the rest of it is quite more operational. And I think we're slightly premature on really scrutinise something that we're not really sure what we're scrutinising yet, you know. So that's I don't know if I'm making sense or not, but I think I am. My other concern is that if they're going to scrutinise and to inspect all 152 authorities, as well as the ICSs by September 25, October 25, is it going to be a rush job? You know, have they got enough resources in place to carry out this a mammoth task? You know, because September 25 might sound 2 years away more, but it'll go. And is there enough people there to do it? Further, last point I'd like to make, going on the Ofsted issues with the schools and the tragic events of this teacher taking her own life, who scrutinises CQCs? Who ensures that they're fit for purpose? Thank you. I hope they're listening.
If it's consolation, you did make sense. And the fact that they haven't yet developed their framework highlights why I am concerned to avoid us getting involved in a big exercise with partners who approached us this week with a view to volunteering to go into an early edition of the CQC inspection. And I just think there could be a great deal of work, and turns out to be more about educating them. And there's a case for that than making life better for us. You see, I think for me, Chair and councillors, I've got to separate doing what's right for the CQC from what's right for ourselves. And I think what this report's helped focus Nick and I in our discussions on is, are we yet clear enough in exactly what we can and hope to achieve, and on your value for money, the best route for getting there? So carers is a piece. We know we have evidence with the carers. We need to therefore, we've developed a strategy. Anyone could write a strategy paper. What matters now is the clarity and the urgency and the depth of the implementation plan to get to the goals we want. Therefore, you need to make sure you have articulated goals which are at once ambitious and realistic. And I can look in other areas of these. Where are the things that we can do better to ensure that we keep pace with demand and don't have delays, etc. So the bit for me is how can this help us manage our own performance better in ways which then when the CQC come will be demonstrable. I'll leave Nick to comment on the piece about trying to do everybody by November 2025. I think we can all see that that's totally unrealistic. I thought, Nick, they had started to signal that they would prioritise, but it sounds as if Carla's heard something different.
Yes, and thank you, councillor. Where to start? So I know Mary quite well, actually. As you can imagine, I've made it my job to know people in CQC quite well over the last year. And they're under considerable pressure because I think, as you've indicated and picked up, they don't actually have enough people of significant experience to do the job. I suppose if I was to have a conspiracy theory, they will have enough people once they've inspected their first 50 authorities. Because I suspect several people will have moved on afterwards. That was the experience of Ofsted, whilst Ofsted was still learning how to do it. So it is really important that we help them do a good inspection and we point them to the things that we know are successful in Essex. And we know we have good value for money. We know we have good services. We know we have excellent staff. We know we have good outcomes. But I think we've also got a lot of honesty about what our challenges are, which is what John's been saying. And we've got some very good plans in those areas. And your job is to scrutinise us in those areas, make sure that we're on the right trajectory, and hopefully they won't see a dissonance between what you see and what they find. That would be the ideal outcome for us. How they get through 152, I do not know if they're going to do it well. And the ICS is on top of that. And I personally think that's an impossible job if you're to do it well in the 18 months or so that they've got to do it. There's also a tension between CQC and its leadership and what the Department of Health and Social Care are asking them to do. So Kate Trelawney, who heads up this part of CQC, I knew her when she was a social worker. She cares about outcomes, she cares about the quality of work, she cares about good practice, she cares about people being involved in service design. But the measures that have been given by the department are about other things altogether. Yeah. So they've got a real challenge in combining those two. And I think we see the tension. And it was Councillor Goldman, who I think, pointed to that tension, which is where are the experience measures here? Because they're using a language of experience and then they're developing a framework, which is about how much of that are you doing at any one time. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Personally, and I'm saying this because it's being recorded and they might hear it, I think that you shouldn't do assurance before you've done reform.
Absolutely.
You should either do them together or you should get your reform done. And initially the plan was to do the reform and then the assurance would follow it. But we are where we are now. So we will do the best we can in Essex. That's absolutely our commitment. We don't know where the benchmarks are. There are 5 authorities who are on a preliminary process at the moment. I don't know if they're all in the public domain. I think they might be.
Certainly 3 are.
3 are. One is our near neighbour Suffolk. They have made their announcement to staff. So we will look closely at what their experience is and we'll learn from them.
Can I come back, Jim? Yeah, Nick, thank you very much. And I think for anything else, you've gone through a health check really on where you are, which is always not a bad thing to do. And from the other side is you don't want to embark on work, as both of you have hinted, that is unnecessary and it's not going to, be worth the time that you invest on it. I think the important thing is that the strategies that we've we've already gone through and you've already put in place would really be vital for us to understand the outcomes, what, now they're all up and running, especially the carers one, it would be great for the committee to see how that progresses as council spends, interjection on the delivery plan, and if, those are being met at the end. So it's all work in progress, but I don't think there was anything else. I think it covers a lot. Right, thanks so much.
Thank you. Councillor Land. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. It might have been a stretch. I thought he put his hand up. Thank you for your presentation today, and also for the pre-meets that we've had. I think they've been moderately useful. And getting here, I think it's certainly been much more.
Really sorry, I'm really struggling to hear. I'm sorry.
Sorry, John, Northern Ireland thing, we're a nation.
My age and failing hearing.
So I think this morning's session's been much more helpful. Certainly answered some of the questions that we've all had after yesterday's prep session, Monday's prep session, and our pre-meet this morning. We are now into a new regime of CQC inspections, but obviously other people have never left CQC inspections. Are there new rules and new variances to how, for example, carers, residential care homes, domiciliary care homes, are there new rules and regulations that match those? If there are, if there aren't, how are we working that? Because obviously we might not be inspected ourselves, but we do spend a lot of time with partners who are. So how are we matching that?
Yes, Claire.
So the single assessment framework that we mentioned here and in the briefing on Monday is going to be across all of the providers. So that includes everything from the local authority, the ICS, hospitals, GP practices, to residential homes and so on. That was due to roll out for existing providers in January of this year. But CQC wanted some more time to get that ready. So that's not due to roll out till October time. So there has been a delay to that. So there will be some changes to all of those who are currently under the CQC framework that should bring it more into line with what we will have as well. So there will be this single framework across the piece from October, but that's the bit that hasn't yet been signed off. So there is still work going on at a national level to develop that. CQC do have monthly provider forums where all providers can go and get updates from them, which we take part in as well. And they are also doing various sort of focus groups and engagement around different component parts of that framework as they're developing it. So Councillor Gooding mentioned earlier about the kind of accuracy. So they have a factual accuracy process. And they've been engaging. So we recently took part in an engagement exercise to help develop that. So there are it is evolving, and we're contributing alongside other providers. So we will continue through the support that some of my colleagues do on the provider side to kind of keep the market up to date with that.
Thank you.
If I could, in straightforward terms, I think you're saying, are they moving the bar quality for our provision? No, they're not. It's the same. It's fundamentally the same, although we'll all be in the same one framework. Things that will fail you will still fail you. And the things that you are required to provide under the regulatory regime, you're required to provide. And Alison has just reminded me that we also have our own in-house services, which are inspected by the CQC, our learning disabilities, residential homes, and our shared lives services. So we have a first-hand experience of what that feels like, actually.
I was thinking how this might impact people like, I'm sure if it's even called that anymore, SCRG, and the work that they do, because they are very, very dependent on understanding the reports that come in. Thank you for that. I have one other question, and it's kind of been bothering me. And I know John said that, actually there weren't that many surprises, but actually, were there any curveballs? You've looked at yourselves in a very, very different way. You've used different language, different different methods of inspecting yourselves with self-assessments. Was there anything we found out about ourselves as an authority that we didn't know, or we didn't know to that extent?
So so Alison may have a view, because she was scribbling away furiously, so I shall pass on Alison just a second. Partly because my eyesight, I can't actually see. Yes, I think there was a surprise for me. And the surprise for me is we take ourselves for granted, and we are large and we are complex. We're the second biggest county council. In fact, we're pretty much joint first with Kent. And there are very, very few, if any, councils out there, apart from possibly Kent, who are complicated like we are. We have multi-NHS systems. We have 5 acute hospitals, 5 community providers, got a population approaching 1.6 million probably by the time the next census comes. And there's nobody else out there like us. So our peer review team came in and they just couldn't get it. They kept asking questions which to me just felt really obvious. And of course we can't do it that way, we have to do it this way. So we had to do lots and lots of education with them about Essex, actually. And they also, I think they really struggled with our variation, because we've got people who do incredibly well, and we've got people who aren't doing incredibly well. So we've got lots of inequalities and variation in our health outcomes. We've got our coastal populations. We've got our commuter belt. We've got our tech corridor. I think by the time they left, they were comparing us to it's like going to Belgium in terms of size and geography and variation. So that was a surprise to me because we just take that for granted. That's just our working context in Essex. So that was a real surprise. And then I think we also learned that there were some things that we were really good at in our view and really proud of, and they just ignored them, which we found really surprising. So how we do our own PR, and PR is a terrible phrase, but how we make sure that we get impact and they understand the things that are working really well. So our whole out of hospital system in Essex is known nationally to be one of the best. Our Connect programme, our telecare programme, our technology programme, our Meaningful Lives Matters programme, it was really a struggle to get them to kind of understand all of that. So I think that's what Councillor Spence was saying about actually the preparation and the learning is where we got most of our value. Alison.
Yeah, so Nick's already taken one of the things, so clearly he can read my page. And for me, it was the breadth of scope actually, and that they could get quite easily what we saw as sidelined into topics that we didn't necessarily expect that they would, and miss others that we thought that they would really focus on. So like you say, the Connect and the Care Tech programme, we thought they'd be very interested in. Actually, they didn't even mention them, but there was lots of focus on disabled facilities grants, for example, with our district colleagues. So it was that breadth of scope and the fact that they can just deviate that I think was a surprise to me.
So we still think we're doing the right things, actually, but we need to understand how we get that message across more effectively.
So the learning for the LGA is they need to get peer reviewers who are commensurate with their own. And I'm not personalising it anyway, but you only need to look at the individuals concerned to understand they did not have that depth of knowledge. Even the upper tier local authority representative came from a very different type of upper tier authority. And I take entirely, just by the way, I took Patrick Warner Higgs out for breakfast today. He had a rather healthier breakfast than me, I should mention. And he's off to be Director of Adult Social Care in Cambridgeshire. The contrast, he's going into Cambridgeshire with 1 ICS and 2 alliances, not 3 and 7, if you include the 2 Southend authorities. I have to deal with 5, including me, 5 health and wellbeing board chairs and try to liaise. And it's been particularly evidenced for me, you may be aware, that the ICPs have been required less than a year after they were created legally to start finding over 2 years the 30% cost saving. Our ICBs are undertaking that task in very different ways. One very aggressively, one very subtly, and I don't quite know about the third. And to be honest, the striking piece for me is no sign, as yet I can find, no evidence I can find that they are thinking together, well, could we merge some roles and create things which run across the county? And that, so you get that. But having said that, as Alison says, and Nick says, I think it does teach us something about the quality of our own communication and how well we help people understand the scale of our achievement. And that applies, and I'll keep saying that applies within this council as well as with outside bodies. I would wonder that if people hear about Connect and Meaningful Lives and think, well, that's okay, but actually it is in many ways groundbreaking. If I get out of hospital later on today, I should be up in London tonight for the LGC Awards, where I think we're up in 3 different elements shortlisted.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cook-Leomy.
Yeah, thank you. Just something else that came out of what Councillor Henry touched on, the various areas that we are linked with. One area of concern that's only been, I think it's been touched on 3, ensuring safety. This hospital discharge, we no longer can engage with the discharge until they've actually been discharged, and that's an area that has always been quite, we might end up getting, inheriting problems where we could have intervened early stage. And is that going to be included in quality assurance? When you pick up something that's not terribly good, which is not your fault, you end up carrying the can for that. So that's something. And with regards to Nick not being able to read your notes, I think that was a thing to refer on the mature leadership, wasn't it?
It's the discharge piece, of course, is this comes back to the framework. What will the scope be? Because it's much more an NHS piece than it is us. We will help the NHS. Suffolk and North East Essex ICP held an all-day workshop learning the lessons of last winter and the winter before. They took all day over it with a very large number of people there. And it was very interesting. I was attending meetings this week about it, and we have another one tomorrow. And the report says, much to the surprise of many of the participants, many of whom come from the NHS, hospital discharge was a much smaller issue in impacting hospital occupancy than they had expected. And that actually, where you keep coming back to, you could do some better things than discharge, although we have no waiting lists in this county at the moment. You certainly want to make sure it's fully joined up, and back to the point, a good lived experience for the patient. What you've got to get back to is reducing the number of cases coming into hospital in the first place. So as long as you are like a dam in Ukraine trying to cope with untold weights of water, you will have problems when the dam just can't cope. And the answer, how you really achieve the goals of the ICSs, which is to find ways to shift resources to the front end, to public health, healthy lives, and effectively the prevention of crisis. So,
yeah. Well, Alison's going to say something on hospital discharge, but one thing that I've just been reflecting on in the course of this conversation is that everything we have said will be reduced to a one-word judgment.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And if there's anything I could change about the process, it will be that.
Yeah.
Right, but Alison, do you want to just quickly touch on that?
Yeah. So I think just linking in with what Councillor Spencer said, whilst our formal statutory responsibilities are after hospital discharge and our discharge to assess, actually we're involved all the way through. And some of that is as part of systems leadership. And some of it is because of the support services that we fund. So things like our reablement, our bridging, and our other providers that do that. So we are involved with people all the way along. So there are numerous touch points where we can step in and undertake our statutory responsibilities, as well as being a good system partner to colleagues who may have the responsibility, but we're alongside them to have the conversation. So I hope that's helpful to clarify.
It just isn't it interesting we're having a debate about what the CQC inspections might do. Do they stick their scope at our statutory responsibilities, or do they look wider into whole system working?
Yeah, exactly that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Plough.
Thank you. And thank you very much for the presentation today and also on Monday. Very useful, and it helped gauge what we're expecting. But I think it was very qualitative, and I'd be quite interested to see some of the quantitative data that we're going to perhaps be benchmarked against, particularly councillors. I think, just to take one example, probably the most likely contact that we would have with the system is residents struggling with getting assessed. So you've mentioned perhaps an area to work on is consistency across the county, but it would also be interesting to know how we perform as a county with regard to times of the assessment. And I know that the CQC will be assessing, or as part of the framework does look at ensuring that assessments are done in a timely, consistent approach. So just be interested to see and hear some of the quantitative data for as how we perform.
So we will. So I picked up a few areas, and maybe we'll do the chair a note later around some suggestions that things you might want us to bring back given the conversation today, just to check that is what you actually do. Certainly, what I call the ASCOF measures, which is the Adult Social Care Performance Framework, which has those measures in it. We should bring back here, I would have said. One of them is assessment times. The difficulty we've got is that because there hasn't been national assurance for so long, every local authority has a slightly different way of measuring itself now. And we do a lot of work regionally. And I was chair of the East of England ADAS branch, or Association of Councils, for a couple of years. And we worked really hard to make sure we're all measuring ourselves the same way. And if you compare us to the other county councils in our region, we're not the best, we are the second best. Our ambition is to be the best. That's what we're doing. And we can put that data in front of you so that you can see it.
Thank you. That'd be useful.
Thank you. Got Councillor Goldman, but I'm also aware of it's 5 to 11, and I know John may need to leave, but
It's quick. Okay. 2 questions. So the first one was the priority areas of focus. Are they in any particular order? Because they're numbered 1 to 5, whatever. I don't know if they're like, if you had to pick one that you had to focus, is at the top of the list, or what? My first question, which you can answer straight away if you want. Then my other question was about follow-up from the peer review question. So I've been surprised, as somebody who got involved in local government over a few years now, how little central government understands local government. And by central government understands local government, I mean even the department that's supposed to be looking after local government doesn't understand how local government works, and it's really quite astonishing, I think is the best way I can put it. And I know the CQC has been doing things for a long time, but how, following on from the question that Jeff was asking earlier about the peer review and your evidence, you were saying that people didn't quite get it because Essex is so big. How confident are we that the CQC will get Essex's fairly unique situation, and therefore will be able to focus when they're doing their review in a way that the peer reviewers weren't able to do it? And besides Nick getting to know everyone at the CQC, what can we do to educate them in advance if that is necessary?
So all of us, you want to go first, John?
Absolutely. That's exactly the worry for me. If you listen to the timescales, if you listen to where they're at now, neither is the worry They will have no scope to listen before they come in, for us to educate them. And that on coming in, because they're trying to get through so many places, they don't fully take the time, they invest the time to get the grip of it. So I would be entirely with you on that concern. And I'm just not sure what we can do, to be honest. But Will, Nick?
Thank you, John. So on the areas of focus, that was a wicked question, I have to say, because we have to achieve all of them. We do. And safeguarding is always in there. So you would never have safeguarding anywhere other than an area of focus, because you should never, ever lose sight and grip of safeguarding. What I would say, Alison's notes I can't say, but I'm sure we're in a very similar place. We have to make sure that we are moving in the right direction, and people waiting, which was the question that Councillor just asked. We have to make sure we've improved our services to carers. There are two areas where we absolutely have to have progress. We've got good trajectory, but as Councillor Spence said earlier, we need to deliver against the strategies. So they're the two areas we're absolutely focused on, but our ambition is to deliver against all five. Our residents deserve that, and that's what we want to do. In terms of leadership, CQC has actually just appointed somebody called James Bullion, who was previously a director here in Essex, and he spent 6 years in Norfolk, and he knows county council as well. He's a very sensible person. So I'm just hoping that he's able to kind of resist the culture and steer them towards a better, more sensitive approach. And I'm a trustee of ADAS, which is our national association. I'm the policy lead, and we are looking to meet regularly with CQC to try and help them be as good as they can be, because it's really important to do this well. We've all seen what happens when inspections aren't done well. The impact and the spin-off of that can be very poor. So we're really eager to work with them and help them do it well.
Well, I haven't got anybody else indicating, which is almost perfect timing for moving on to depart. So I'd just like to say a big thank you. I don't know whether there's any additional question thing that we'd like to go through. So if you want to leave at this point and get on with the rest of your day, please feel free to.
Thanks so much. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it much. Thank you. Go anywhere.
Thanks for all of you. I think Well, thanks to everybody for that. I think we'll have perhaps a bit of a roundup at the end in our private session once the formal business is over. I actually thought that was very interesting. That next item is future work programme, isn't it?
Yes, Chairman. So work programme item, which looks a little bit different this time. It's got the usual table that's sort of just outlining what we got coming up, hopefully with a few more dates against them and working our way through them. But it also, there's a second attachment with it's a brief note around the private session this committee had last month, where we reflected back on what the committee had done over the last 2 years. I presented some analysis and there was some discussion, so I've just hopefully reflected that in a reasonable amount of detail. Which might prompt further discussion, but again, that might be something, Chairman, you want to take at the end after the formal meeting is shut, and we just discuss that a little bit further. But as regards the work programme itself, the next upcoming items, so hopefully you've all now had an invite for an extra additional session of this committee on the 28th of June. where we've had the offer from the independent chairman, statutory partners of the Adults Safeguarding Board to come in and brief you more at an operational level around safeguarding adult reviews and some of the findings from those recent cases. The chairman, I believe you've requested members to attend in person, I believe, Chairman, as opposed to holding it virtually. So we will try, to convene that in this room on the 28th. So that's the upcoming one. That's a private session, but I will do a note of that session to feed back into a future public meeting. And then the next meeting is the 13th of July. There's been some discussions, Chairman, that you've been involved with around following up from what we've just discussed today around CQC preparations and possibly inviting in the head of provider quality, our own internal quality team, possibly to expand upon what they do to support providers and also how they work with the CQC. So if that's something the committee wants me to formalise, we can set that up with Sam Crawford.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and particularly that meeting on the 28th of June, the additional one that needed to be a private meeting because we're going to be talking about some live cases and some details that they'll give us an update on. So clearly that should be a good follow on to what we've done in previously on the safeguarding package, but actually look at. I'm slipping into the jargon, some of the lived experience of the people who join them. I must not slip into jargon. But hopefully I think that should be an interesting meeting. And we'll put some bones to the sort of strategic stuff that we talk about too much sometimes. So I think that will be an interesting one. Okay, anything else on that, Graham, that you need to raise at the moment?
No, I think we can probably follow up on most of this after the meeting. Yeah,
great. Okay, well, that leaves us. Sorry, did you want to?
Yeah, Chairman, just before the meeting, just a reminder on the 6th of July, the Emotional Wellbeing and Mental Health Conference at the Racecourse in Chelmsford. We've all been asked to attend that by very beneficial to the committee, I think, especially with the view that the work we've done on the mental health task and finish group. I think the invite has gone to all members, Graham, hasn't it?
I only saw the email last night, actually, well, in fact, this morning. So, but I believe it's gone to certainly HOSC and PAF members. So certainly those two committees.
So we've moved the HOSC session to the following week.
Yeah, some of us were having to make a choice between the two. Subbing, but it's fine now.
Okay. So the date of the next meeting is the 13th of July, although obviously we've got our private session on the 28th of this month. And just any urgent business? I haven't been advised of any, so.
Can I just get back to the work programme? Because I think it's important to have on the record the fact that in the previous agenda item, we were talking about items that should come back to this committee. And I just think just formally, we should record that those things like the key metrics that we were asked to look at and the key focus areas are things that we probably should be putting on the work programme for this committee, which was specifically raised in the previous agenda item. So
yeah, I think that's a very important point. Thank you for that, because we can make sure that that's added and we can plan things properly on that. So thank you for that. So on that basis, I'll call the meeting to a close at 11:05. I think this is a record.